All right, the time is finally here. We can finally talk about the new Thrive Apprentice reporting feature. This is something that's been a long time coming, and I've had to really be quiet about it and haven't been able to share anything. But I'm excited to finally be able to make this video and do a hands-on walkthrough of the new reporting features to show you kind of just a general overview. I think Brad from Thrive Themes did a really great job, kind of just doing a macro overview of the new reporting features. I definitely check out that video on the Thrive Themes channel. But in my video here, what I want to do today is to give you a slightly deeper look into some of my favorite parts of the reporting features, kind of show you some caveats into things that you might have to look at a certain way in order for them to be useful, and a way to go about thinking of the reporting so that you can utilize it in a way that's going to be helpful to your business. Now, the data that we're looking at today is from a snapshot of my website. This is actually one of my testing environments where I clone an existing website of mine. It's actually my course site for Convology. This is a couple months old, and I've cloned it, and I'm going to have to spend a lot of time editing and blurring out people's names for privacy. So I'm not going to be as freely scrolling around, otherwise I'd be editing this video for like the next 8 hours. So bear with me as we kind of go through this and we take a look at some of my favorite sections. And so let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna get myself out of the way here. Okay, so the first thing is the new main Apprentice snapshot. I actually think this is a decent overview. It's kind of like in Google Analytics. If you're a Google Analytics user, you know that most people only ever hit that basically overview page of the analytics and data. And that's because when you drill down too deep, things can kind of get confusing and less useful. So just by going to the reporting or reports option rather here on I call this the inset menu. I just made that name up. It's basically the blue apprentice menu here on the left-hand side. If you go to reports, you're immediately going to see the snapshot menu. The snapshot's here at the top, and as we expand out the course dashboard, it's going to give us more information and reporting. And then we have the coming soon quiz reports, which I'm super excited about. Okay, so at a glance, we have a couple metrics that I want to go over. We have our course enrollments, which is basically just people getting access to courses. We have our average course progress, which is actually a really telling number. We'll talk about that in a second. We have new members, which is just people that have joined within the time period you've selected. We have a little latest members section here. I don't know if that'll be super useful to you. For me, not so much. Kind of my feedback on the whole reporting thing is I know how many people buy my courses. I'm intimately familiar with how many people buy my stuff. It's my business, right? So I need to know those numbers. A lot of that data is in Stripe. So to me, this isn't the most useful section, but we'll get into some useful parts of member data reporting in a second. All right, and scrolling down a little bit onto the page here, we have a popular courses section. Interestingly enough, it looks like one of my courses is more popular than the others, and then the others are all like equally popular. I think that has to do strictly with enrollments, right? So how many people have enrolled in the course during the period of time? I don't think this is actually like people taking the courses, because I know my data and I know that this would be much higher for some of these courses. So interesting, popular courses, what determines popularity? It's probably just enrollments. We have our popular course details here. I think this is particularly interesting. You can kind of see within the time period how many people have enrolled, how many lessons are completed, and then back to this completion rate metric, which we'll get to in a second. And then down here towards the bottom, member activity. This thing I actually found particularly useful. This is something I really like that Thrive did here is they gave you two type of ways to display the data. You can display the data cumulatively, where you can see in my chart here, we have, looks like steady linear growth here. And then all of a sudden we have this big boost in member activity. And I like the way that this data is represented when you look at it cumulatively, because I can see when that spike happened. If I went to non-cumulative data, I can still see when that spike happened and I can see it more individually, but it's harder to represent it kind of like in aggregate. Now, when you look at a non-cumulative data, this is better for seeing kind of like just a general overall, I'll use the word health, but it's like a general overall representation of when things are happening. So you can see when I got my bigger spikes here a lot easier than you can right here. You can kind of see that data. But I like this because then you can see when members are engaging. Now, interestingly enough, my data looks like this because I made a change to my template where I made my course completion buttons higher up. My old template used to have the course completion down at the bottom. No one ever pushed that button. So when we come back up to the top here, as of the time of this snapshot, which I think is from a couple months ago, you can see that according to this, no one's ever completed a course. Funny enough, I mean, that actually might be true, right? We know that online courses are completed like less than 20% of the time. But when it comes to Thrive Apprentice reporting, we have to be really careful about something. And that's that if we allow people to jump around in lessons, someone can take a lesson, basically go into a lesson in your course, watch a video, and then go to the next lesson by in the sidebar, maybe they moved to the next lesson, or they went back to the course overview and they went to the next lesson. If they don't push that button wherever it is on your template to mark course as completed, or even if you have a button like I do in my design where it's basically go to next lesson and you've set it up to mark that lesson completed, it's never going to trigger a lesson completion. And so you'll have data that looks like mine, which is completely useless, where it says no course completions. So here's kind of what I'm talking about, right? I'm on a demo site right now and I'm in a lesson. Normally in the default templates, and how I had this set up for over a year, is the user could go to a lesson, watch the video, and then on the left-hand side, just go to another lesson, right? I'll change lessons right now. And you can see that that would not have triggered a course completion. If I go back to this lesson, I would have had to scroll down and click this button and hope I had it set up to mark the lesson as complete in order to trigger that that lesson had been completed. Now, coming back onto my actual site right now, here's an example lesson. If I scroll down, I've changed my template so that now they cannot get to another lesson unless they push next. This is actually the same design that I put, it's on the channel right now. It's like make your apprentice look like Kajabi or something. But it's actually been very helpful because you saw in my data, my engagements and my lesson completions shot way up because they could not get to the next lesson unless they pushed the next button. In this case, that actually takes us to the next module. So let's go to a lesson here. Here's our next lesson. I have to push the next button in order to mark the lesson as complete. Now that's super important because you want to have that completion data. If we again look on the right-hand side here in the bottom right in my table, my courses have completion rates of like 10%, 38%, 46%. This one's 0%. It's an older course of mine that I definitely have the button lower down. So I'm spending so much time on this because I want you to realize that this data may not actually be accurate. It may not reflect the true completion, I'm doing air quotes, completion rate of your courses. So bear that in mind and set up your templates appropriately to take advantage of it. Now let's move on into the kind of more in-depth reporting sections here. We're in the basic course dashboard sidebar. A couple of things, again, course enrollments, not the most useful number. Course completions completely empty. Engagement's interesting because it just lets you know if people are actually in your courses and doing things. And then I think this lesson drop-off chart here is completely useless when you look at all of your courses. I think I have like 9 courses right now, and this isn't helpful, right? This kind of data is not helpful. So what you can do instead, and interestingly enough, if we go down here, you can actually see this blue line. In August, I implemented the new template where users could mark lessons as completed, and look how the engagement just shot, like skyrocketed. So bear in mind that this really does play a big part in your data. Okay, so continuing with our trend, let's just keep going down the list here. Course completions, look how useless that data is. I have nothing because no one's marked every single lesson in my course is complete. Then we have lesson completions. This would have definitely skyrocketed recently. People have started to mark lessons completed. And then we have our progress and drop-off rate. I think this isn't as useful when you look at all of your courses, so maybe I'll select one of my courses here. So now we're just looking at one course. I think that's actually, I think a lot more useful. You can see where the drop-off is per course. So in this particular example, looks like people are generally engaged throughout, and then there's a significant drop-off towards the end. And again, I think, and this is kind of why I'm making this video, because I want to try to give you ways to think about your data. In my particular course, as you get to the very end, these are the courses that I add onto, or the lessons that I add onto the course. And also, these are some of the more advanced particular lessons that are kind of optional. They're kind of niche lessons. They're lessons that you wouldn't necessarily want to take. So really around here, around lessons 29, 31, and 33, towards the end, this is when the kind of meat and potatoes of the course ends, and then I have this drop off. So if you're really in the game to kind of maximize your drop off rate, I don't want you to feel bad and be like, man, look at all these people dropping off. Well, in my case, they're dropping off for a reason. The data is basically representing reality. In reality, very few people are going to want to complete those lessons. And then we have the engagements tab here. Again, this represents the picture of a massive, massive change in my way of creating a template and getting users to interact, but it also represents comments and other things like that. So throughout, and this is probably honestly why these lines look linear, because over time there are more and more comments happening. And if I come over here, again, look at that, just paints that picture. Now, one of my favorite tabs is the latest activity tab. I skipped popular courses and top members because it's kind of irrelevant. These are just kind of repeats of what you can already see on the Apprentice Snapshot. But we'll go into more in the next video that's going to be all about individual member data, which is fantastic. So I jumped down to the latest activity because I really like this tab in that you can kind of get a snapshot. And again, this is when I was testing this out. So this is all from last month. But essentially, you can just get an idea for what are people doing on your site in literal real time. So, this person right here, did 3 lessons. This person down here completed a ton all at once. And you can just get a sense for the overall, like, what are people doing in my courses? I don't know why I love this. I just think this is fun to watch and to look at. Okay, so that's our hands-on, kind of like a preview, first look at the Thrive Apprentice reporting suite. I think Thrive did a fantastic job. I think that compared to all of the reporting data that I've seen across different course platforms, this definitely ranks among the top ones. I think there's a lot of data in here that isn't particularly useful for someone, at least like me, where I'm not tracking a lot of the aggregate data of my courses. The way that my membership works is I sell an all access pass. You get access to all of my courses at once, which if we're looking at the screen is why probably the popular courses are all kind of the same. But in general, I think there really are some good nuggets that you can dig in and take a look at inside of your data to understand if perhaps on the drop-off chart that we looked at before, is there a problem? Are there lessons in the middle where most people just aren't taking that lesson? That's a good way to kind of evaluate the content. It also is a good way to affirm what you might believe, right? Like for me, remember in my one course, everyone was like pretty engaged consistently across the whole course. And then right at the end, there was just a steep drop off. I knew that was the case, but it's just nice to get that confirmation in the data. I think for me, the biggest takeaway in all of this, and I think that this is what I would say should be everyone's big takeaway, is that this is the floor, right? This is not the ceiling of reporting. This is now the baseline. And from here, Thrive can build on this data reporting and build upon this to give us more and more access to the metrics that kind of affect our day-to-day operations of our businesses and help us make better courses for our students. I mean, right here on the screen, coming soon quiz reports, you know that that's going to play a big role in people who have, even people in the Convology community, a lot of people are in continuing education. And we're going to talk a lot in the next video or next 2 videos about tracking individual progress and quizzes and certificates and things like that. This is huge. So I think that if this is the entry level of reporting, there's some really cool things coming to Thrive Apprentice.